bit of an interesting dialogue today. What I want to dive into is the concept of your own structural and atomic weather conditions. When we're thinking about who we are and this life experience that we're having, especially when we're thinking about the law of attraction or what we are manifesting or creating in our environment and in our life, we often take a view of what is an extension of us or the external plane that we are experiencing. But what I want to do in today's lesson is direct the concept back to our internal world. And I'm not talking about just our conscious world, but the actual biological vehicle that you are existing in, and talk about how it is that your consciousness, yours and mine, is affecting every atom, every cell, every structure in our bodies at all times. And so often we forget that we control, in essence, the weather conditions of our own biological experience. So what does this mean? How is it applicable? And how can you adjust the weather settings in terms of your own internal frequency dialogue output to create a system that is smooth sailing? So the first step, of course, is identifying that you are the creator of your own system, your own body, your own emotional intelligence, and whatever is happening within your closed system. So we already know that there is that trickle effect that moves to the outer existence of our world and our interactions with others. But with all of the noise in the world nowadays, it's often hard to recenter ourselves and come into our own world in a really directed and poignant way that affects our entire experience. And one of the ways that I can do this very quickly is through the analogy of being my own internal weather goddess. You know, is the weather happy? Is the weather bright? Am I energized? And I'm feeling this at a cellular level. I'm feeling into my atomic structure. I'm feeling into the quantum field, that intelligence that directs everything within my body. And when we tune ourselves and when we teach ourselves to tune into our system this way, we start to recognize some of the programming that's likely happened over our entire lifespan and then we can start to reprogram some of these negative habits that create or generate the stormy weather patterns inside of us. Now, as I was speaking of, when we're looking at identification, it's good to categorize things in an intelligent way so that we really understand what we are seeking and what we are trying to tap into. So when I think of my internal system and the weather that I'm creating within my own body, I'm looking at my positive creations, the positive aspects of myself, that positive polarity. And those are things like joy, energy, excitement, purpose, health, so that dynamic vibrancy, you know, the brightness that you feel when you really feel like your body is motivated to do things and get things done, and that inner propulsion of creation. And then also identifying on that negative spectrum or the negative polarity, the things within our system that feel atomically mundane, stuck, drained, achy, sick, not motivated, and really paying attention to both circumstances. And because the system is so dynamic on multiple levels, we have to pay attention to all of these levels all the time. And it seems like quite an arduous task when you first delve into unpacking the layers of your system. But the more you put this into practice, the more you'll start to identify it very quickly. So why I want to be able to identify these things is for the means of correction and rerouting my internal weather system to get it back on track so I am feeling my absolute best. So in terms of what I can create and the feeling of me being in my external reality is always acclimating to a more and more positive version of what I can create and what I can experience with my external world. So what I have noticed specifically for myself, and everybody and every system is different, but if I am creating a lot of negative thoughts, negative projections, if I'm visualizing individuals or situations or events that seem catastrophic or induce a stress response within my system, what's going to happen as it trickles down through all of my systems to that atomic level, to that cellular level, I'm going to feel worse and worse and worse. It's essentially going to trigger that fight or flight, whether it's anxiety, whether it's the release of cortisol, but essentially all my little cellular workers and all of the atoms that make up my system are going into defense mode. And what that creates is a negative patterning on the inside of my system, or the totality of my biological body. And when I'm pushing myself through massive amounts of stress, or if I am indicating to myself more stress than actually exists, I'm perpetually putting my body and my structures into stormy weather. And then I'm having that expectation that this biological vehicle is supposed to supersede all of this negative programming, the negative thought forms, this emotional chaos that I'm putting it through. So what I've identified over the years that has become a lot easier in terms of how I deal with, different challenges and obstacles that come up for me in my life is by becoming the director of my own internal weather system. And so this identification that I'm doing is always checking in with this projection, this constant flow of energy, ideas, and how I'm seeing my internal world and others around me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here. When I was young, I used to get into this zone of anticipating either getting sick or glorifying being sick because there was some residual benefit to that. I got days off school, or the caregivers in my environment might pay a little bit more attention to me. But what I had to do with my internal environment was create a lot of havoc for me to actually create this environment of not being well. And of course, you're always going to buy into whatever storms or whatever chaos your mind is creating. The body has that domino effect and will flow into it. But it's a slippery slope, because as you grow up and as you create this kind of knee-jerk patterning it within yourself, it becomes something that is a perpetual cycle, and your body becomes very good at zoning into not feeling well, or anticipating that you're going to have some sort of illness crop up, or that things are going to malfunction in your body. And I learned pretty early on with my own system, especially with things like anxiety, not feeling well, having a really sensitive nervous system, that with really a short burst of negative thoughts or creating my own mental storm, I could really create a lot of chaos that would snowball into something that I really couldn't control. I hadn't learned how to control it yet. And it would become fairly traumatizing, and I would start to feel really out of control. I'd start to feel really sick. I'd feel extremely anxious. And it's not that I was trying to do anything wrong. I was just being an adaptive organism in my environment, seeking out attention, seeking out, trying things out in the energetic plane of interpersonal relationships, as well as the relationship with my body, mind, and the world at large. But what I was able to identify is that if I proceeded anything that had to do with my body in a negative connotation, if I preceded that with positive thoughts, so if I started to feel a little tickle in my throat, or a little bit like maybe a stomach ache, if I could focus on my internal thought world and talking to my cellular structure, letting my body know that we're capable of healing. There's absolutely very, very few times where I will feel any value to my system, to my environment, or anything like that in putting myself down a notch and feeling into my own ability to be sick or to go off kilter. And likewise, if I really, really need a day of rest, I can certainly propel myself into this thought process of, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm feeling drained. And I'm not saying that when you have been through a lot of stress, or it's very obvious that your body is indicating that you're feeling drained, that you always push through that. That's not what I'm saying. And a little bit of backstory into my world, and how I deal with the pressures in my world. I do own many corporations. I own many colleges, many medical centers, technology companies. It's not like I'm sitting around doing yoga all day long. I have a very acutely, what you would deem as stressful work environment, if I choose to frame it in that context. But because I have been able to really gauge my internal weather system, the way that I approach anything and everything now is with a very joyful spirit. It's a very grateful spirit, a very thankful spirit. And I am continually checking in with my internal dialogue, with my cellular structure, with my, atomic beingness, and thanking my body for its excellent performance, thanking my brain for being so tuned in. There's other layers to this, because of course, as you move up the spectrum, I'm always ensuring, because I'm paying such close attention to the feedback loops within my system, that I'm giving my body the most natural, organic foods that I possibly can. I'm not overeating. I'm exercising. I understand the mechanisms within my body, obviously being in the medical industry and the aesthetics industry, understanding the body systems. And this is much of what I've taught for 20 years. I do really know, and I have tapped into all of those different body systems. And so I understand them from a biological level as well. So I have that ability to understand how to best tune all of my systems for the highest output. But if you're new to this idea, and if you're just starting to integrate it, or if you've been on the path for a really long time, having this idea of being your own weather master of this system, to me, is a really quick and easy way to check into your system. And when you get into what I would call is, a bit of a stormy pattern within myself. So this is when, maybe I've had a few really rough days, things will happen in terms of our operations where it's more of a heavy load on administrative, and maybe there's some frustrating things that are cropping up that are really, really laboring, time intensive, and quite boring. You can tend to get into this inner storminess where you feel overwhelmed. You'll kind of feel this dullness to life. Life doesn't have the brightness that it does when you're able to, mix up your days and interact with multiple people and, get some of those different artistic outputs going. And when I get into a zone like this, or this sort of stormy atmosphere, it helps so much to have regular, disciplined self-check-in mechanisms, okay? And so what do they look like? How am I going to check into my system? So for me, a lot of this is very ritualistic. So I always have some sort of morning ritual where I am in gratitude and really tapping into how thankful I am for everything in my life, both the challenges, the diversity of the experiences that I'm experiencing, and the beautiful blessings that I have, okay? And then I'm always learning, because an active mind is a purposeful mind. So each and every day, I make it a chore for myself, not a chore, actually a gift to myself, to learn something new about the world, about myself, about relationships, dynamics, something scientific, something creative. In the morning, I always set aside about 40 minutes to learn a new skill, okay? And I'm gonna integrate that skill, whether it is listening to a podcast, reading a book I'm really interested in, doing some art, taking on a new technique, something that's going to expand my mind and get me really excited about the day. Now, the next thing I put into my rituals for starting the day is some sort of exercise, okay? I love to swim, so often I go swimming in the morning. A beautiful, hike is another way that I love to wake up and greet the day, or just some light exercise in the gym, whatever it is. And I will likely pair that with some sort of joyful music. Music is a frequency, and when you have something positive and energizing in your morning, it really helps to set the tone of the day. Now, there is a caveat to this, and a lot of individuals will say, well, I don't have time to do that. There's no way I could fit this into my day. Well, I'm telling you, I usually work anywhere from 11 to 12 hours every single day with all of my businesses. So I get it. It's busy. I have my family. I have, all of the different things I'm managing. So what I've done is I get up super early so that I can give myself these additional 2 to 2.5 hours of my own time during the day. Sometimes this means getting up at 4 a.m. And what you're doing, setting the tone for yourself this way, is you're creating this beautiful entrance to each and every day that really sets the tone, sets the weather for the entirety of your day. Then you're better prepared. You've already given yourself this magical experience, this grateful experience in the morning that sets your day up for perfection. And what I find that happens with that is that my day will go a lot more smoothly. I'll be able to handle all of my internal world and all of the things that are external to my world with much more ease, grace, and compassion and attention to detail. Now, in terms of the other rituals that I have, I always make sure that I eat a huge raw organic breakfast that gives me all of the vitamins and nutrients that I need to be really, really effective. Sorry, my leg is going to sleep here. Really, really effective in my day. So that's another one of my hacks in terms of giving the best I can possibly give to my body. And when it comes to the other rituals in my day, I give myself a quiet time on my lunch break. Now, my lunch break is often not very long. I'm talking 10 or 15 minutes if I possibly can get that. But if I have that, 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to shut my door. I'm not going to have any external conversations. I'm going to really center myself. And I can do this with a quiet 10-minute meditation. Again, always a really nice organic lunch, raw if I can, but very, very high nutrient, lots of greens that keep my body really stable, keep my insulin levels stable, and keep my mental acuity really high, because I'm going to have a lot of tasks that bridge into my afternoon and go throughout the evening that I don't want to get irritable or irritated, and I want to be able to stay on task and really always give the best to my team. So that's another thing that I really pay attention to, is what energy I'm giving to others. I always want to be a positive force. I want to be lifting them up and encouraging them and making them feel a little bit brighter. So when you pay attention to what you're transmitting and what you're giving to your team members, that energy cycles back. So the more positivity that you're generating with your own system, the more you're generating to those in your environment, and hopefully that positive energy gets reverberated back into your system. Now, other rituals, pretty much the same as my morning ritual. I always make sure that I do some sort of light activity at the end of my day, whether it is a nice sunset walk, another couple laps in the pool, some sort of light stretching, yoga with a great podcast, whatever it is, to get my blood oxygenated and really get my system, sorry, my little puppy's barking there, get my system spinning back into that positive momentum before I'm going to go into my sleep cycle. And the other thing that I really make sure of, because everything, sorry about that, Riley, she's gonna bark, it is what it is. So everything that you're doing in preparation for your sleep cycle is so essential in terms of your body's overall health. So first of all, in terms of that overall weather, making sure that you are getting really awesome and adequate sleep. How do you do this? Making sure that you have zero caffeine after 12 noon. Caffeine will definitely interrupt your sleep cycles, and I don't even recommend it. I've started doing, mushroom coffee in the morning, or decaf coffee with a cappuccino, and I just find I'm much more level. Your body will kind of, if you're used to having a caffeinated beverage in the morning that wakes you up, it'll take you a little while to get out of that cycle, but once you're out of it, your sleep will be much more calm if you are eliminating that caffeine. And in terms of what you watch before bed, I try to make whatever I'm going to enjoy in terms of television, what I'm reading, or anything that I'm watching online to be positive and light. Because if you're getting into something that's really dark, heavy, or scary, even though we deem it as entertainment, it is precipitating your consciousness. And the more that you embed that negativity or that dark storyline of the world, the more you're going to see it crop up in those sort of knee-jerk reactions or the way that you project onto the world. So just remember that everything that you are consuming is affecting the totality of your internal weather system. All right, this is getting into a little bit of a long video. I'm going to cut it short because I am heading for a bit of a swim. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will most definitely address them in upcoming videos. Okay, thanks so much.